that soft targets are becoming a new normal. Here to discuss, please welcome the Director of Threat Information Office, the Center for Security Policy, Mr. Kyle Shideler. Kyle, welcome to the Hagee Hotline. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
We're so glad that you're here, but at the same time, the topic that you come to discuss is one that we really wish we didn't have to discuss at all, and that happens to be soft targets. For those who are watching that might not understand the difference between a hard target and a soft target, give us what the industry's definition for a soft target is.
Generally speaking, when we refer to soft targets, we're talking about non-military targets, non-security force targets. So it wouldn't include things like targeting the military or targeting police officers, but it does include any place where civilians gather, especially where there's a low security threshold. So not airports and airliners so much, but concerts, cafes, open streets, these sorts of places.
And we've also seen their methods, the terrorist methods, change, where we started out with airplanes in 2001 that attacked buildings in New York and Washington, D.C., but we also now have transitioned into guns like what we saw used in Sutherland Springs and Las Vegas this year, to now terrorists using their vehicles and taking on these soft targets. So they're kind of changing their tactics as time goes on, are they not?
Well, we know that terrorist groups will always change their tactics in order to adjust to what the good guys are doing. Now, Islamic State and al-Qaeda in particular have focused on urging their supporters, instead of going abroad to get specialized training, such as in explosives, they've said, stay where you are, conduct an attack with whatever you can find, whether that's a knife or a machete or using your truck or car as an attacking weapon. And they've been quite successful with that, actually. It's not a new strategy per se. We've seen this similar tactic in Israel, for example, dealing with the threats of terrorism from the Palestinians. But it is a response to the increasing security that Western countries have developed since 9/11.
And you know, you mentioned the increasing security. It would seem that the kind of order, if that's the right word, that a terrorist organization would give to its sympathizers, stay where you are, do what you can, that would seem almost desperate. Are terrorist organizations becoming desperate, or are they only becoming more invigorated? Because you hear both sides of that story.
I believe that they're becoming more invigorated. The call to supporters has to do with raising the profile of the group, but also of increasing the ideological commitment of individuals abroad to groups like Islamic State or al-Qaeda. The recognition of individuals either here in the United States or in Europe or elsewhere that they can take part in the jihad on behalf of a caliphate without even leaving their hometown, it is an invigorating call. And we've seen that. We know that, over the past few years, the FBI has dealt with over 1,000 cases of individuals trying to join Islamic State or working to engage in terror plots on behalf of the Islamic State. And that's just the one terror group. It doesn't include al-Qaeda or other groups in the United States that may be planning similar attacks. So we've definitely seen an increase on the basis of this strategy. So I would say that it is indeed working for them.
I'm curious, when you look at how they have changed their tactics and changed their ways, when you look at some of these countries in Europe now that have faced this longer on their home soil than the United States has, they're talking about this being the new norm, and somehow the people that live in these countries need to accept these things as the new norm. Is that where we're going here in the United States?
Well, I mean, I think, your viewers need to realize that countries like France and Belgium have had military on the streets on an almost constant basis for years now as a result of the jihadist threat that comes both from their homegrown population, but also from the massive flow of refugees coming in through the Middle East and North Africa. And because they have chosen not to deal with that issue, it's only really caused their terrorism threat to grow exponentially. You can't ultimately solve terrorism by hardening targets. There will always be a softer target. But we've seen them try to use physical concrete barriers, military checkpoints to try to lower this threat and make people feel safer. But the real way to defeat this threat is through preemption. It's through quality intelligence and getting not just technical intelligence, which the United States and Western countries are very good at, but also human intelligence, getting inside these communities, getting inside these networks, figuring out who's who and what's going on. And that's the real way that you're able to disrupt these threats.
You know, you mentioned the intelligence gathering community. I think one of the foremost leaders in that obviously is Israel, based on the fact that they're on the front lines of this kind of war and have been on a perpetual basis since they began. Some of the wars get publicized, some of them have long-standing military actions, but on a daily basis, Israel faces enemies at every border who seek to do it harm and do it in this same type of terroristic manner. What is it that the West could learn from Israel's methods on intelligence gathering that we're currently not employing?
Well, the Israelis do not outsource their intelligence gathering of the communities that they're dealing with, either the Arab Israeli community or the Palestinian community, to outsiders. They do not rely on nonprofit NGOs to tell them what the Muslim or Palestinian community is thinking in the West Bank or in Gaza. They also don't deal with and are very quick to blacklist groups that deal with terror groups like Hamas or some of the other Palestinian terrorist groups. We have not seen that from the United States and other areas of Western Europe. Instead, what we have seen is this reliance on something they call countering violent extremism, which puts a middleman in between the affected community where you're looking for these threats and the law enforcement and the intelligence. And that middleman is some community organization which may or may not have the best interests of the United States at heart. We've seen, for example, the U.S. government rely on groups that have links to the Muslim Brotherhood and therefore relations with Hamas as community partners in some neighborhoods. This is absolutely unacceptable. It will never give you the kind of intelligence you need about the community in order to do effective policing and effective intelligence. And until we get away from that model, we're going to be in trouble.
I have to ask you, knowing that we only have about a minute or so left, every time we see somebody from CIA, Pompeo, or somebody that's high up as an official on one of these shows, they're asked, what keeps you up at night? So I wanted to ask you, what keeps you up at night?
What keeps me up at night is the knowledge that the law enforcement and intelligence community in the United States are not getting the training that they need on understanding this threat, the ideological basis for it, the wider support that it has amongst Islamist movements. It's also the failure to address organizations that promote these groups, like Muslim Brotherhood, for example, that I believe should be designated as a terrorist organization. So the failure to address those threats is what keeps me up at night.
Well, Kyle, I pray that there is an opportunity for each and every one of us to gain confidence and peace in knowing that we have adequately assessed the threat and dealt with our enemies. Thank you for the work that you do to help keep this country safe and all that you do to bring awareness to this situation. We welcome you back anytime to the Hagee Hotline.
Thank you.